Now, after reading this story, you will probably think that I am a mutant or that this does not happen at all. But unfortunately, it is so. My name is Call. I am 20 years old now, and I will probably be 20 years old for many years to come. No, I'm not immortal, but I will definitely live longer than an ordinary person. I don't have a heart. Or rather, it's not alive. It's mechanical. I'm a bit of a robot. I was born an ordinary person. My father is a scientist. He is an engineer, and my mother is a housewife. They divorced when I was 14. My father spent almost all day at his job. He had a secret service in the Ministry of Defense. My mother did not approve of his absence and did not believe that he was working and not walking on the left, cheating on her. When her nerves gave out, she packed her things, wrote a note saying that she was going to her sister's because she couldn't live like this anymore, and left. I was at school at the moment, and when I came, I saw such a gift. It went straight on my birthday. I must have forgotten about it. I was almost mad about it. I could not believe in such a betrayal on her part. I remember sitting in the kitchen and crying because my mother didn't have a sister. I called my dad, and he arrived early. At first, I thought it was a joke, too. He was confused and scared. How to live now? How can he cope with a child? All this terrified the both of us. The first thing my father did was call my mother, but she didn't answer. So he said that he would go to the police and report her missing. At that moment, I was already afraid of Dad, or rather his actions. I could see that he was emotional. He was so freaked out that he smashed the glass in the kitchen with his fist. After wrapping his bloody hand, my father grabbed his car keys and barked at me to fasten my seatbelt. It was raining and it was late. Well, then the classic. My father lost control. We got into an accident and crashed into a truck. If I hadn't been strapped in, I would have probably died from a broken spine. But the situation was no less severe. Shards of broken glass pierced my chest and hit my heart. The ambulance arrived. I had a very difficult operation. But the doctors thought that my heart was almost useless. They gave me a couple of months, and I couldn't have lasted much longer. My father blamed and cursed himself for what had happened, saying that he had not kept his wife and ruined his son. Well, then he pulled himself together, and after being discharged from the hospital, he took me to some place. I was very weak and could hardly walk, and he kept dragging me around on a stretcher or in a wheelchair. I remember how I found myself in some basement room. It was cool and a little damp. "This is my lab, son. Your mother left me because of her. In her opinion, I had mistresses, so this is what she is," he said, joking. I barely looked around and saw that there was an unrealistic amount of all sorts of equipment. Did I tell you that my father worked for the Department of Defense? So at that time, my father was the head of a group engaged in developing a new level of project. The state planned to create an invincible army of half cyborgs, half humans. All this was in pilot mode, and of course, top secret. My father told me that now that his son, I, was in the grave with one foot, he decided to go against the laws of nature and revive me with the help of science. "I can't lose you too," he said. There were several other people around, and I was being readied for surgery again. Dad put a mask on my face and I fell asleep. In my dream, I saw my mother. She was crying for some reason and was unhappy. She was on her knees at someone's grave, begging for forgiveness. As I approached, I saw my name on the tombstone. Oh no! I opened my eyes in fright, but I could not speak or scream. The first thing I saw was my father sleeping by the bed. I didn't know what was going on. It was terribly painful to breathe. I tried to remove the oxygen mask from my face, and my father woke up. He approached me, his eyes and face telling me that it was a long time since he had slept or eaten properly. My father calmed me down and told me not to worry about anything. In short, his project was a success, and I was the first person to test it all. And I survived. As I was told later, my heart was replaced with a special artificial prosthesis. This operation is now performed in the world, but mine was slightly different from the others. Since it was a military laboratory, the goals and ideas of the project were aimed at improving the soldiers. My father hid some details, but after the operation, I began to recover faster. My body grew stronger, and I became stronger. Another feature is that I can now live longer than ordinary people, and still not change my appearance. I became a completely different person, not the same as before. Every day when I looked at myself in the mirror, I wondered what would have happened if my mother hadn't run away then. Perhaps I would have had a happier childhood, where there are no endless checks, injections, IVs, ultrasounds, tests, and stitches all over my body. I hated her, and my heart was filled with anger. After all that, my father and I learned to live together. I came to terms with the idea that medical procedures and examinations are part of life, and its image. Only in the movies can a person continue to travel, drink, smoke, and dance until morning after a complex operation. In my case, every extra stress could cause the body to go into shock. This meant that I had to lie down on the couch again for examination. My father quit his job and started a business so that he could be with me more often. He still felt guilty about what had happened. To keep me occupied, he offered me sports, which was a great charge, and I felt strong at that moment. When I turned 20, I became a professional wrestling coach. My new heart constantly demanded that I be on the move, and all these years were dedicated to active sports. I didn't care about anything else, and I have to admit that my father was really worried that I didn't have a girlfriend. He even began to think that I was not interested in them at all. Ha ha ha, but it's not. I just haven't met the right one yet. And to be honest, I wasn't sure anyone would want to be with me at all. Better to be alone, I told myself, and Rachel appeared. A heart doesn't have to be love, Call. I've always told you that. Hi, I'm almost Iron Man's girlfriend, she said, laughing. The first time I met Call, it seemed to me that he was not a man, but a machine. Then I just signed up my brother in the wrestling section. What struck me was that Call didn't even have shortness of breath after the hour-long fight. It was more than strange, and I came dozens of times, and he looked anywhere but not in my direction. That was until I almost hit him with a car one day. He ran into the road so suddenly that I barely had time to slow down. Call said that he was running and had accelerated so fast that it was difficult to stop. Of course, I didn't believe him at first. So, word by word, we met. Our first date was the stupidest in the world. Call didn't know how to talk to girls at all, but it was funny. And then I found out about his story. I was scared and surprised. A comic book story, I told him. And then he showed me the full-length scar, and when I pressed my ear to his chest, I didn't hear the knocking. That's when I went into shock. Call thought I'd leave him after this. They say that meeting a man like him, and even with such scars, is not so pleasant. But no, I had already fallen in love with him. With a man without a heart. And as you understand, you can love without it. Be kind and gentle without it. If everyone were like Call's father, hundreds of thousands of lives could be saved. That's why Call and I decided to go to college and train as surgeons. I can confidently say that I was lucky to meet such a person. You don't have to be self-conscious just because you are different from others. On the contrary, we should be happy that life continues. So don't be afraid to love.
Hi everyone, I'm Kurt. As you may have noticed, I'm a guy, but I have something from a girl. This is something that will surprise you greatly and from which will arise a lot of questions. To be honest, I had a lot of them myself when I saw this thing in my own place. Well, everything in order. First, I'll tell you more about myself. I have a family with me, an older brother, in addition to my parents. My brother hasn't lived with us for a long time because he's married and has his own family, and I'm younger and still haven't got out of the nest. My brother and I are different. He is more calm, likes quiet evenings, board games with children, heart-to-heart conversations over a cup of tea, and I always loved extreme sports. I was doing sports. I was pumping my body. I had a perfect six-pack. The muscles on my arms were sticking out nicely from under my t-shirts. I was proud of my body, mainly because I am more like my father. My dad is also active, and my mother is modest and quiet. When summer comes, I will definitely be climbing mountains, swimming at speed on a scooter, sometimes racing by car. I'm a risk taker, and I think life is one, so you have to live it with emotions. Once, though, my recklessness almost killed me. In the middle of the holidays, the boys and I decided to go for fun on the boats. The weather was just awesome. We invited a few girls to relax with us. One of them I really liked, and I planned to hit on her that day. In general, the guys and I drank a little alcohol. Well, from somewhere came the courage, mixed feelings of extreme with reckless. The boat on which we rode, we had rented. Everything was great from the mood to the water. At some point, when we were already pretty drunk, I asked the girl I liked to dance. Lola agreed immediately, and I realized that she had the same feelings for me. We held hands and danced to a cool slow dance, and I was happy. I looked into her eyes. She smiled at me, and I knew that now is a very important moment. She is waiting for my kiss. I leaned forward slightly and held my breath. At that moment, the boat lurched and we lost our balance. Lola started to fall down, and I caught her arm. We were very scared, and the guys were too, and the panic started. One of the guys jumped right into the ocean, but suddenly I saw that another boat was coming at us. Dude, the driver lost control and it was heading straight for us. At that moment, I saw everything in slow motion. Lola and she was in the water, I was on the boat holding her hand, and a boat was moving towards us. And then once and for all, I lost consciousness. I came to myself only in the hospital. I don't know exactly how much time passed, but when I opened my eyes, my mouth was dry, and I didn't immediately know where I was or what I was doing. My mother and brother ran up to me. They began to calm me down, saying that everything was fine. When I was a little more recovered, I turned my head and saw that my right arm was bandaged, but the real panic started when I couldn't move it. The doctor came in and see the fear in my eyes, and he calmed me down and explained that we had been in a terrible accident. You and that girl Lola, you were holding hands when the boat hit you, so you lost both your hands. You're right, and she's left. We did the surgery and sewed them back on, the doctor said, as if he were talking about dolls instead of people. I began to be indignant. How did they come? Rejected? Are we dolls or something? I became hysterical, but my parents calmed me down. It wasn't until an hour later that I finally got the message that the doctors did it for a reason, but to save our hands. I was in a state of shock and didn't want to accept this information. It's good that I blacked out and don't remember what it felt like, and most importantly, I didn't see what it was like. Only after a while did I ask how Lola was doing. She, unlike me, did not lose consciousness and watched all this and endured the pain. She was given a lot of painkillers and sedatives. She was asleep at the time. After some time, I don't know exactly how long, I was finally told the good news. You can remove the stitches and see the result. In principle, I felt my hand. Of course it hurt, but everything is better than without it at all. It was an exciting moment. When the bandages were finally removed, the room was silent. I didn't look to my right, but the silence made me tense. I looked at the doctor and the nurse, saw the confusion on their faces, and lowered my eyes. What? What did you do to her? Why is my hand so thin? Why is it painted red? I shouted, as if scalded. I didn't understand why they had so disfigured her until I heard a scream from the other ward. Lola shouted the same words. Yes, as you guessed, we were sewn on the wrong hands. The doctors made a mistake and swapped our hands. This is such trash. Lola's tantrum was worse than mine, but she's a girl. We were still a long time to calm down, until the doctors again injected us with sedatives. After the chief physician came running to us, my mother's threats that she would sue them, he promised to resolve the issue quietly and peacefully at his own expense. But for this we will have to go back to the operating table. In the meantime, you need to take some time to get your muscles a little stronger, because the operation is not a joke. A day later, Lola and I met at the hospital to look at our hands, and she couldn't hold back her tears at the sight of hers. How many things she saw and remembered for the rest of her life. This boat ride will stay in her head forever. We somehow found words of support for each other, and then we had to live a little as the doctor ordered. It was terrible and ugly and strange to see yourself in the mirror with the woman's hand, and knowing that you can control it. Lola and I only saw each other to check on our limbs to see if they were all right, but man, you don't want an enemy to go through that. Lola and I tried to hide our hands as best we could. The school year has already started long ago. It's good that we went to different schools. I wore long sleeves and a glove on my hand to hide it. The doctors did everything they could to make sure I could manage it, but I would still have it. I didn't even mind the awful seam on my forearm anymore. We went through this for about a month, carefully hiding a part of ourselves, and waited impatiently for the second operation. I wasn't even afraid of the fact that my arm would have to be amputated. I was willing to have what was rightfully mine returned to me. Still, as the doctor promised, the operation was done. Everything went well. Of course, rehabilitation, medications, pain, and the desire to destroy the hospital were also present, but this time without any mistakes. Everything went fine. I'm still in the recovery phase with Lola. It should take time. It's good that we have it. Now I plan to invite Lola to a movie, but during this time we managed to become related to each other. We got as close as others cannot do it.